Well, responding to your latest video, this one actually wasn't much better than your 20 evolutionary myths one, but I'll go ahead and why not. First of all, it's pronounced Archaeopteryx, not Archaeopteryx. It's not even phonetically correct, and quite frankly, to be honest with you, I'm not trying to be mean, but it's hard to take you seriously when you go on and on for 10 minutes mispronouncing the very thing that your entire talk is centered around. Nonetheless, to begin, the turrico and other birds that are seen in modern life that have claws on their wings, those claws are never found during adulthood. They're only found during development. And something that's actually very interesting, and this ends up supporting evolution, of course, is that what we tend to see is that the offspring tend to typically, or not offspring, but later generations tend to look a lot like the newborns and infants and etc. of the ancestors. So, for example, like with us, we typically look like our ancestors young. You could also argue that these birds, the turrico, for example, look like they're young, would look like Archaeopteryx, which they do. They have claws, and the adult Archaeopteryx has claws. Archaeopteryx is actually the only specimen that does have claws in its adult form. Moving on, the ankle. The paper that you cited, actually, that was fair. You weren't quote mining or anything. That was good. Unfortunately, the study was 27 years old, and the picture that they drew their conclusions from, it actually showed the junction being at the calcaneum and the astragalus as opposed to just the calcaneum alone, but that aside, overlooked. I'm actually quoting something online from a study done by Walker. It said the Archaeopteryx ankle depicted by Martin et al. In 90 seems in fact to be structurally intermediate between the theropod ankle and the neo-ornithiform bird ankle. So by 1985, the leading proponent of the crocodilian theory, Walker, had decided that the theory was no longer tenable. But that aside, something that's very interesting there, if you noticed more recent studies, the more it's been looked at, it actually the ankle is in between the theropod ankle and, side note, Thecodon ankle, and current birds, which is exactly what evolution would predict. So this isn't a problem whatsoever for evolution. In fact, it supports it once you actually look at it and study it, as opposed to just taking a quick glance at an ambiguous drawing from 27 years ago. Also, the timeline with the thecodonts, you're actually dead on there. That's perfectly valid. Well, first of all, you have to understand fossilization in general, so that's not really an issue in the sense of not every living thing is fossilized, and you can still be with your descendants. For example, there are still Australians and there are still British people. Even though they descended from one another, they still coexist. But that aside, I actually believe, along with Dr. Alan Fiducian, that birds are descended from basal thecodonts, not therapsids. But that's, I guess, another debate for another time. And I'm very proud of you who didn't, or for not quote mining Fiducia about Archaeopteryx not being a transitional form, because every credible paleontologist or biologist, period, notes that Archaeopteryx is a transitional form. And actually, if you can find me a paper, anything like that whatsoever, from a non-quote mined scientist in the past 5 years, not 27 years ago, that questions whether or not Archaeopteryx is a transitional form, get back to me. Oh, and a side note, you also completely neglected the 47 other characteristics of Archaeopteryx, which are completely reptilian. Oh, and that also reminds me about the teeth comment that you made, how the serrations are absent. And by the way, that's actually the only difference. And the serrations are present in basal thecodonts, also supporting Fiducia's view. But either way, that's just one diagnostic characteristic that was off. All the other ones were the same. So again, it's not really a big deal. So yeah, if you can kindly get me a current, credible ornithologist, paleontologist, biologist who will assert that Archaeopteryx is fully avian, I'd really appreciate it. And by scientist, I actually mean, from a real university, not a creationist scientist, like an actual scientist. So, thank you very much.